Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Allan Pincus, owner of Dream Egg Games. Allan's debut title, Computer Junkyard, a spatial puzzle game about building a computer out of vintage parts, is currently on Kickstarter. Allan, welcome to the binge. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It is great having you. Oh gosh, when I see a game like this, being kind of an 80s nerd myself, it brings back so much nostalgia. So we're going to get into that on this episode, but let's first start off with kind of the beginning. I know this is kind of like a whole family endeavor for you. Like, how long have you guys been like board gaming and things like that?
So I'm maybe a little older than you. I'm 70s, late 70s vintage. So I've been
Sure.
playing with computers since I'm 12 years old, 13 years old when I had my TI 99 4A. So this particular thing started about 22 years ago. I have a son and a daughter. My son's actually 25 now. And when he was 2 or 3, I took an old computer I had floating around in the 90s, from the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something just sitting in my garage that was probably a lot of money back then, a couple grand, I guess, and became obsolete. And it was just sitting there. So I didn't want to get a new computer for a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. So I took that out, plugged it in, and it wouldn't work. And my background's technology, and I opened it up and poked around, and the power supply was shot, but so was the video card, because I had to make 2 trips down to the local electronics store. Brought the power supply, found a replacement, didn't quite fit in there, so I used it anyway, right?
Yeah.
I did have to find a matching, I think it was the video card. Got it working, didn't take long, and I had this we had this preschool game, Disney game. I popped it in and off and running, and there's my son grabbing onto the mouse, and that's what really struck me was, holy smokes, the youngsters, keep in mind, toddler, 2 or 3 years old, the mouse is an extension of the hand immediately, and he immediately understood instantly how to move himself around in the game, playing with the Disney characters. You go to Goofy's garage, actually, and you could take a car apart, put it back together. You could spray paint it. So I was amazed.
I remember
watching
this game, actually. So was this on floppy disk, this game?
No, just CD-ROM, right?
Got it.
So we didn't have anything anymore on floppies. Maybe I did. I think I had a bunch just sitting there, but floppies kind of went out of style in the mid to late 90s. So the computer probably had a floppy disk. I don't remember exactly, but it was CD-ROM. I do remember 5.25-inch floppies, though, and people don't probably understand floppies were literally floppy.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, my first computer was a Commodore 16.
Oh sure.
Not even 64, a 16
Yeah.
And I know that was a precursor to the VIC 20. And I remember, I remember back then, literally using DOS, and you could actually make your own games, right? And so I would create choose your own adventure, D&D style type games, or try to find very simple kind of scrolling kind of games where you're just kind of jumping over things that you try to make, like logs that are made of different characters and so forth. But the nostalgia behind that takes me back, like the number of hours we would spend as kids just tinkering. Right. And the magazines, I remember PC Magazine, and I'd always buy that magazine because in the last 2 pages, there was a free game. And the game was literally 2 pages of code that you would have to manually type into your computer.
Yeah.
And always it would always break. It would never go, you'd always miss a character somewhere, and it wouldn't go on properly. But just that nostalgia, I'm sure, as you're going through the design of now a board game that kind of plays off a lot of these elements, it's got to kind of take you back to when you were a kid, I imagine, right?
Between the Atari in 1978 and my TI 99 4A in 1980, I became a coder.
Yeah.
I loved the idea I could make something do what I wanted. And I actually created a game called Geronimo
Okay.
that you would jump out of an airplane and have to land on a mat by popping your chute open without going, quote, splat.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
saved it on cassette tape. We had cassette tape. That's how we would save our code, and
Same
you
with
could
the
hear
Commodore
the.
16 was a cassette tape. Yeah.
And I printed the code out and I sent it into. There was a specific TI magazine. I can't remember the name of it. They published it. I wish I could find it. They published my code.
No
I was,
way.
yeah, like 12 years old. I wish I knew where that copy was. I think I had it. They published it. I came across it. I was getting that magazine every month or however often. Um, I remember doing my dad's amortization. He was curious if I could actually calculate it. And again, I'm like 12, 13 years old. I'm a science and math kid. Although I have a whole, they talk about left brain, right brain. I'm also an artist, a musician too.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
people tell me I use both sides of my brain. I'm glad to hear that. My
Yeah.
wife would argue. My wife might argue. Pieces are missing in my head, but probably. But anyway, so watching my son play and me opening up the computer, fixing it and closing it, and seeing all the cards in there, power supply, motherboards, memory modules. I had the CRT monitor. Um, um, we don't, in today's world, even in this was 2003, even
Yeah.
then, computers they keep getting more highly integrated,
Yeah.
which is how we're getting computers down to a few $100. Is it's one big board and you have everything you need on it. And so if I opened it, there's nothing to look at really, nothing like it was. Now, granted, whoever's listening that is let's say a real gamer, sure, they're still probably putting computers together. But my notion at the time was when I was watching him for a while, I wanted to play with him. And people were saying all the time, kids are on screens all the time. And it's worse now, I mean, to be honest. But
Oh
back
yeah.
then it was games, games, games. As the internet started happening more and more, it was online games. And I remember as a kid playing board games constantly because that's how we entertained ourselves in the 70s and 80s. Mostly we'd get together. I hung out with my friends. We would play Risk, we would play Monopoly, we would play game after game. I must have had two or three dozen games, I'm guessing. Even chess, backgammon, those kinds of everything get our hands on. um, that wasn't happening anymore. And my son would say, first of all, he was little, but I could predict that he would say things like pewter.
Mm.
Pewter. He wanted to play the computer. So I remember thinking to myself then, I wish there was a computer game not on the computer. It was just that simple thought.
Yeah.
It was oxymoronic. I knew it was oxymoronic, but then I thought, why can't there be a computer game not on the computer? I was really surprised by that there wasn't one. At least they couldn't find one. And I said, wouldn't it be fun if you got to build your own computer? And I meant it as a game, a board game, not as
Yeah.
let me go get parts and little parts and build a working computer. That wasn't it. The idea was I want to create a board game based on a computer that we could all sit around and do something interesting. And Computer Junkyard, the name of it popped in my head instantly. I said, because I went to an electronics store, not a junkyard. I went to an electronics store to buy this stuff, and it was only literally, I think the power supply was $8. Video card was a few dollars because they're just sitting in his junk, and I had to go through it and find the compatible card. That was the fun part. And when we do talk about the game, I emulated that in the game, and we can talk about that later.
Sure.
But that was the inspiration of the game. I'm a creative guy, and in today's world, even back then, you could go to Staples and you could buy, those sheets of business cards, and you could run them through your inkjet printers. So I said, I'm going to make a bunch of cards out of business cards, and I'm going to make my own artwork or download off the internet, just find some imagery. So I said, what would I want in the computer? And I started literally printing out imagery.
Hmm.
I would put a sim or a dim, memory module and a hard drive image, and I just created all these pieces, and the game started to create itself almost. It
Yeah.
was, so my first prototype was a bunch of business cards, and I must have had 300 business cards. and it was impossible to play.
Mm.
It was a lot of fun, but the rounds would take half an hour and we get through 10 cards. It was like, okay, this is the start, not the end.
Yeah.
So that's what the inception was. And that's going back 20 plus years.
Now, were you a board gamer outside of like computers? Like, were you playing any games in the hobby at all, or?
So sure. I tend to be a strategy gamer. Listen, I was a big D&D kid growing up. I had Gary Gygax's first edition of Dungeons and Dragons, where it was literally a dungeon and there were dragons. Quite literally, was it. And I remember playing with my friends. This is 1976. I remember because my best friend in third grade, we played together, and I was dating myself now exactly. It was 1976. We were in his basement, and we took it literally, quite literally, that you would take 10 paces forward, 10 paces to the right or left, and he was decided to be the dungeon master, and he would say, okay, you can go straight ahead 10 paces. So I would go literally 10 paces forward. There's a door in front of you or whatever. It was a dungeon, and at that age, it was scary, actually. And then you learn really quickly, wait, I don't actually need to walk around in a quote dungeon, but I'll never forget that first time I ever played it.
Yeah. When designing the Computer Junkyard, in my mind, one of the hurdles you'd have to overcome would be, how do I make this accessible, right, to the average player? Because not everyone builds computers from scratch, right? So it's like, okay, I can't just service just the crowd that makes computers and now they can do it in a board game style. Is like making that accessible so that literally anybody can play. Yeah. What process did you go through to, for lack of a better word, kind of dumb it down so that it's accessible for people?
Yeah, in fact, I'll answer that. But if somebody said, "Tell me what your game's about," the game's about competition and strategy and solving problems and winning the game. A distant second is the computer.
Right.
It's a distant second. It's a theme.
Yeah.
But I take lots of poetic license with it, right? So sure, it's based on real world parts, but anyway, to answer your question, I would say the first, if I had to break it down into stages, phase one, kind of getting it as a concept out there, built itself. Mm-hmm. Because the overarching idea was we could sit together as a family and play a computer themed game. It really built itself. So the idea was you were going to lay cards next to each other, and I had connectors that were just color coded because I wanted anybody to be able to do it. And I wanted you to have I have a block diagram in the game. It's all color coded, right? Let's face it, in any game, there's a theme, because I could have called this the alphabet game, sure, and you connect A to B to C to D to E, and when you play Z, you win. That's not the theme, right? So in theory, you need to know, not in theory, in practice, you need to know nothing about computers.
Yeah.
If you can follow a color coordinated things and you can learn how to buy and sell these parts, the exciting part is it's so nostalgic, right? That was also part of it. Was it's a throwback. The game created itself to begin with. I'll call that phase one. So let me pause there. Does that help kind of?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think it's important for the audience to know that it's not, you don't have to be an expert at computers or even have design computers to play this. It kind of reminds me along the lines I was just showing on screen there a second ago and showing it again here, where you've got different color coded kind of puzzle pieces that kind of connect together. And much like if you're playing like Isle of Cats, and this is not a polyomino, it's more of like puzzle pieces you're connecting together. I just want to make sure that's clear. But it's like any game where you're, what's the other one they have that's called Dresser Drawer or something like that? There's a junk drawer. There's one of the games out there where you're kind of combining different things together to connect them together to get to kind of your final kind of completed puzzle, which then allows you to kind of trigger the end of the game, so to speak. And I think that's important for people to know that, you don't necessarily have to have played, built a computer to play this game. It's very visual and it's very colorful and very puzzly looking, and even your art style. And I know we'll talk about your daughter here in a second, but
Yeah.
your approach to the art style I thought was quite clever as well, where it's a bit more kind of whimsical. So like if your computer has a bug, you literally have a bug that's
Right.
connecting into
Right.
into computer. If you need to clean the bug, there's like I think it's like bug spray. You're using that
That's right.
to clean off the bugs
That's
and things
right.
like that, right? So so let's kind of walk through this game for those who want to kind of figure out like okay, explaining how to play. Can you walk us through how to play it? And let me just start before you do that, just by acknowledging the fact that I mean, you still got 8 days to go, and you're already out. I'll put this in Canadian dollars. It's the only way I can see it. But $286,000 on a goal of 7,000. So congrats on
Thank you.
just the funding you had. That's for your first game. Like for any game, that's a huge number, right? But for your first game especially, kudos to you and the family on that. Now walk us through kind of how one would go about playing this game.
So let me establish the world, the game world. So, right in the manual, I don't call it rule book, right in the manual, on the first page, it defines the world. It says, you and your friends found a bunch of old computer games at a yard sale. I don't know if you call them yard sales, but at a garage sale, yard sale, and can't wait to play them on your computers. And to your dismay, your new computers, your modern computers, they just won't run them. So you all decide, why don't we see, let's all each try to build an old vintage computer, and with the cash in our pockets, and right down the street is the Computer Junkyard, so you know exactly where to go to buy your pieces. So that's the world you step in. Okay. The way the mechanics work is there's about 100 game tiles that are hardware, and then there's some, the bugs. We have the computer bugs, and all of those pieces go into a bag, right? Hidden in a bag. And each player has a board. We didn't talk about the phase 2, phase 3, because I feel like I'm in phase 3 of this game development, but come phase 2, I realized I wanted to create a boundary condition, because people were putting these cards together, and it was sprawling. And it was actually a little too easy to build it. And I'm like, well, how do I fix that? And I went, oh my gosh, parts go in a computer. So if you were to look at my board, it looks like a computer chassis bottom. Yep. So you have the boundary conditions now, and the game suddenly popped. It suddenly felt like, wow, this is real, because it was no longer haphazard. You had to plan and strategize. So in the middle, everybody gets their own board, and in the middle, we call it the junkyard. And each round, some tiles come out of the bag, right? I mean, there's a setup. I don't have to go there, but tiles come out of the bag, and there's three phases. I'm using word phase a lot. There's 3 phases in each round, and the rounds go and go and go until there's a winner declared. Taking one step back, when I was a kid, and I'm guessing you were as well, and I had one of my earlier computers in the mid 80s, the first thing we did was, when we went to the toy store, the game store, whatever, we would look at the back of a game that we were interested in, and we would need to know at a minimum 3 key elements. 1, do I have enough CPU power? 2, do I have enough memory, to run this? And number 3, can I fit it on my disk drive?
Yeah.
See, today, when you have a half a terabyte, whatever, back then it was like, I have 50 megabytes, 100 megabytes. Games could take up 10 to 20 megabytes. Yeah. I have my operating system. It was a big deal. So and look, a hard drive wasn't $30. A hard drive was $200 or $300, or you bought something junky, ergo Computer Junkyard, because a lot of us would just buy used stuff because it was cheaper. So parts come out of the bag, and you have a block diagram, which is color coded. Everybody starts with a motherboard, right? So you have your core tile. It's a square, and it has input connectors. See, one of the things that came out of the development was everybody kept bumping their cards, because you're moving them around, you're disconnecting, you're reconnecting. And when I say connect in the original version, the cards were placed adjacently, and you had to line up the colors. But the minute you picked one up, you bumped the other ones, and I'm like, this is annoying. And I realized, what if we just hook them together? Yeah. And when that idea hit me, I was like, holy smokes, I've got to figure that out. Now, at this point, my son, who was 2 or 3 when this happened, he's now deep in this process. In roughly when COVID hit and we were all stuck at home, I guess one of the positive things that came out was I didn't spend 20 years developing this game. I spent on and off a month here, a week there. Life got in the way, kids, jobs, whatever. Fast forward, I probably hadn't worked on it in years. And my son says, Dad, we should get that game out. And I pulled the prototype right out and basically started building it up. And my son, I got him a hobby 3D printer. I used to sell high-end 3D printers as part of my job to corporations when in the 2010s, 12s, that was when the height of it was. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to 2020, he had a hobby 3D printer, and I gave him the specs. My background's technology, engineering. I hold a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and I understood mechanics, and I gave him specs, and he became an expert in the 3D printer, expert in 3D tools, and he printed out these plastic tiles that were perfect, quote unquote, perfect rectangles. We put connectors on them, and right out of the box, literally the first ones we made, because I guess we were thorough, worked. So you could connect two tiles together, rotate them, connect them in different places. And that became the basis for the idea that I remember going to the electronics store and I had to sift through all of these video cards because most of them, the connectors weren't in the right place, right? Or the ribbon cable or the adapters, like there were problems. And I'm like, I'm going to emulate that. And I'm going to have a half a dozen, let's say, video cards, and the connectors are going to be in different places. Now, they'll all connect because every connector fits with every other. Input and outputs all match. That was very deliberate. I wanted people to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. I wanted you to accidentally connect a CD-ROM drive to the wrong tile for fun, rather than making them all have to connect with each other. That was a very deliberate design choice. And the connectors are in different places. So what happens is when the board is fairly empty, so I start with my motherboard and I connect a couple pieces. People don't understand why this is difficult. As you start adding pieces, it gets a lot harder because you have less space.
Yeah.
And then what happens is you connect a memory card you need and then realize it's in the way of another port. So you picture the real world. If I'm populating a computer chassis and I buy a power supply that's bigger, it might not actually fit inside, literally, right? And you're like, I really need to buy a different power supply. So you might take that power supply literally back to the store. I blew it. Can I return this and get a different one? And the answer is sure, because they're selling used stuff, and the price would be subject to which one you wanted. I said, I've got to emulate that too. So there's this buy-sell mechanic.
Like a market, yeah.
And a market, right. And what I learned as I went through phase 2 of the game was I had to get the right balance between how much cash you had, how much space you had on the board, how many components there would be. Digressing for a moment, everybody gets a random software tile at the beginning, and on it has how many CPUs, how many RAMs, and how many hard drives you need. We spent a lot of time, my son, who is I don't know if I said it, he's a PhD candidate at Boston University in computer science, taking a little, and he's heavy duty math. He went through the combinatorics of how would we combine things so that when each player had a tile, that there was no favorite tile, right? No easier or harder tile, but I wanted them different. So we balanced all that. That's like phase 3. Phase 3 was how do we go from an idea to a concept to applying arts, and I don't mean graphic arts, I mean the art of designing a game, to formalizing it, systematizing it where the game just actually works. I call that phase 3.
Yeah.
And my son and I figured out what the right combination was. So you get a tile at the beginning of the game, and we made fun names for it. Like we really wanted to immerse people. So all the game names I came up with my son and daughter, who's now, my daughter at the time was 17, she's now 21. We came up with names of games. So a lot of them are just Easter eggs. Like we have one we made up called Coaster Sculptor. My son is addicted to roller coasters. He's been addicted to Roller Coaster Tycoon since he was little, and continues to be really into roller coasters. I don't know if I said computers, I meant roller coasters. And we called one Coaster Sculptor. Then we called one, when I was a little kid, I was working, I don't think it's in on my page, but there's one called Volcano Man, right? And has a tagline. When I was a little kid and my younger brother said, to me, Alan, go make a game and we should call it Volcano Man and you have to save the princess or whatever. So there's an homage to that. So there's 7 titles in there. Um, and the titles don't matter, but
Yeah.
it's immersion in the world. So the idea is the whole time you're building, everybody needs the same components. Everybody's looking at the same block diagram. The configurations are different for everybody. We don't even know how many different combinations there are with games at all. It's probably in the trillions of combinations, unless you deliberately wanted to build the same configuration. And the only subtle difference is I may need 2 hard drives and somebody else may need 3. So as you're building, nothing else is hidden. That was another thing I wanted. I wanted a very little luck, a lot of strategy, and I didn't want you to have in your pocket something hidden and said, "Ah ha ha, I've got this.
Yeah.
I've got this thing. You can't do that to me." I find those, if those
Let's
elements are
take
too
that.
much, the game isn't fun. And
So with the
there aren't
software though, so just to be clear, so on the software dictates kind of the type of computer you have to build, right?
Kind of.
Kind of.
Everybody's building the same computer. Everybody has to have the same set of components. It's the quantity of the hard drive CPUs
Right.
and
The requirements of what the software needs to.
right. So
Yeah.
when you finally build it, everybody has to have a total of 6 of those. The combination will be different.
Yeah.
Right.
And then did I read somewhere that there's simultaneous play in here as well? Like
Yeah.
you're built. So how does the simultaneous work?
So there's 3 phases to the game, short phases. We call, when we originally created it, each player would go and take their turn. They would take an action, build their computer, and then everybody would check to make sure they had followed the block diagram, because if you didn't, you had to remove pieces and put them on the side. And pieces on the side, which they call the workbench, we do have some luck. It's easier to steal from the workbench than the computer,
Sure.
right? So you really wanted to be right. It was taking 5 or 6 minutes per player, and by the time it came back to you, it was taking 20 minutes, and the game was taking 15 rounds, and
Yeah.
it was getting way too long. And number one, and while somebody was building, they didn't want to be timed, and I would have players like, you play Scrabble and somebody's sitting there trying to figure out the best words, and you're like, go already. That was starting to happen later in the game, because all of a sudden people couldn't fit all their pieces on easily and were constantly struggling with them. I added a timer element.
So how's the timer work? Is it like a sand timer? Like what's...
Yeah. I
Okay.
went nostalgic. Nobody needs a timer, but I'm including a sand timer because if you want to use it's 2 minutes. If you want to use
Okay.
a sand timer, great. If you want to use your iPhone, great. Whatever. But what happened was we moved it. I realized, well, it would be so much more fun. Why doesn't everybody build at the same time?
Yeah.
So the phase 1, we go around one by one, and there's an action. So you draw 2 tiles out of the pouch to seed the junkyard, to keep increasing inventory, right? You either get to buy and sell hardware, or you can try to steal something, or you can try to debug your computer, right? Those are the 3 things. Once you've made that decision of what you want to do, the next player goes, and so all 4 players go. Then phase 2 is the build phase. The timer's passed around, so player 1 becomes player 2, becomes player 3, and I call them the sysadmin, right? So you pass the timer at the end of the turn to the next sysadmin who controls the timer. Timer starts, everybody has 2 minutes to build, and at the end of the 2 minutes, if you haven't gotten everything hooked up properly to the computer, whatever's not hooked up properly, that goes back to the workbench, and it's frustrating because, again, a little easier to steal from the workbench.
Yeah.
After the 2 minutes is up, the last phase is, if somebody played their software tile, they say installed, right? You can say whatever you want, done, but the fun in the game was, hey, I installed my software, right? So if you can play your software, and guess what you connected to? You have to make your final connection to the CD-ROM drive. I play it, I say installed. Everybody checks to confirm I actually did build the computer according to the block diagram, and that my hard drive CPUs and memories matched what was on the card or exceeded. You could have more than you need, right?
Yeah.
Which starves other people from those tiles. So there's a strategy to hoard components. And you're the first person to do it, and everything's right. And you're bug-free. Can't run a buggy computer, right? So you're going to have to get rid of any bugs. You win the game. If no one declares they won, so like at the beginning of the game, nobody can declare they won. You play another round, and the timer moves to the next person, and whoever holds the timer goes first. That way we have a rotating element. Each round now only took it still could take 8 to 10 minutes, depending on where you were in the game and how much people were thinking about it. But really early in the game, it could literally be 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So the earlier rounds went quickly. Mm-hmm. Later rounds started slowing down, and nobody cared it slowed down later because everybody was struggling to try to see who could win first, right? So there's a lot of layers of strategy. We didn't talk about theft. That's an interesting thing, but I'll pause there and see if you want to switch gears.
Yeah. So in terms of so it's clear that you guys have, from a meta level, understand the building of the computer quite well, and this has been ingrained into the game style. What is the plan for you as a company now going forward? Like, are you continuing with kind of computer themed games? Are you working on other themed games? Like, is this kind of a one and done? Or are you guys is this now a publishing house? What is your plan?
All right. So I built this game to scale. What I mean by that is, and we don't have to go into it, but I've spent a year or more, maybe even more, getting to the point where I said, maybe this really is real. I had too many people telling me to create a game, create this as a real game. And I started investigating manufacturing costs. I truly started figuring out what the pieces needed to be, and locking that stuff down. And I got quotes to do it. And I said, wow, this is real. Because I'm a business guy too. I've run my own business and I've been in industry for literally 35 years, or running my own business. And you learn, I wanted it to be real. And I knew that if I didn't have the proper markups, the proper margins, and I couldn't compete, nobody would buy it.
But what's the plan going forward, though? Are you going to continue as a publisher, or are you launching other games, or what is your plan?
Yeah, that was my point, is that I'm built to scale, which means I'm also built to, I want to do more games. And
got it.
We already have, I won't say what all of them are, but we've got 5 on deck.
Oh, wow.
But they're all on hold temporarily until I see if the market accepts it. So we're going into production in September. And here's the interesting and exciting part. I've spoken to 3 distributors now, real distributors, who say, we want to sell your game. I've spoken to a dozen retailers that are asking, will you sell direct to retailers? I had literally Amazon call me to say, we want to invite you to our new vendor program, where we will assign someone to help you onboard your game. I'm really humbled, excited. This looks like it's going to be real.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be buying inventory in October beyond just what the backers are getting. I'll tell you what the second game is. It's called Starship Junkyard.
Oh, nice. The whole Junkyard theme, eh?
The Junkyard theme, number 1. Number 2, it's not a reskin. I won't go into it. The key thing is my mechanic is so unique. There are none of the manufacturers I've spoken to have ever said, oh yeah, we've seen this game where somebody has 100 tiles and you connect and disconnect and connect and disconnect. This is designed not to be a puzzle where you stick it together and it stays that way. This is designed where you can easily disconnect and reconnect. They're loose fitting, because the idea is you have to move it around. You're not stuck with a configuration. You get to move it around, move pieces around, because you have to make, excuse me, you have to make room for other pieces, right? So there's a frenzy as you start connecting things together, just getting the stuff on your computer. But then towards mid to late game, guess what? The piece you bought doesn't fit. So you want to sell it back or trade it away. You could actually make money on a piece, because every turn the junkyard's changing inventory like the real world would. Yeah. So if there's more of them, I have a price for it. If there's more of a particular component in the junkyard, you're going to pay less for it. So there's so many strategies. Do I buy extra pieces early and pay less because people are going to need them? There's scarcity. Very scarcity of resources, like the real world is. There's only, let's say, 5 of a particular component. If I own 2 of them, somebody else can't finish. When I talk about it, I'll say it's always, let's say, 4 players. 2 to 4 can play, but there's very scarce resources. So if I buy 2 of something, guess what? Somebody can't finish. They're going to have to deal with me. They're going to have to figure out how to get the one that I have.
So as we get closer to launching that one, we'll get you back on the podcast. For
those
those who want to check out this game, I'm going to encourage them to check out, we're going to put a link in the show notes. that they can click to, or you can just type in Computer Junkyard and you'll find this campaign. There's still 8 days to go on this campaign. It's funded incredibly well. I encourage people to check out the page. It looks like a lot of fun. Allan, I want to wish you all the best to you and your family on this campaign, and I can't wait to see what you guys have coming next, my friend.
James, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.